Do you find that a lot of your clients come to you neglecting their body, like just don't care about it at all, or they do care about it, and then they, like you said, they sabotage themselves. They know what they need to do to feel better, but then they just sabotage themselves.
Great
Can you,
question.
can you, I think it's really
So
big.
I find a little bit of a mix with that. Um, I'm just trying to think of where I want to go with that. So, the ones that self-sabotage, if you look at their lives, they really don't have a whole lot of self-discipline in a lot of different areas of their lives.
Mm.
So maybe it would be the opportunity to incorporate that and bring that in.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Diagnosis, a podcast to raise your awareness, decisions, and voice for alternative practices so you can take back control of your health. I'm Rita De Michele, your host, a mindset and empowerment coach, and the founder of the ONUS platform. Join me each week so you can create the health of your dreams. Welcome to today's episode of Beyond Diagnosis. For our listeners who have a chronic health concern and are feeling stuck, stressed, or hopeless in finding an answer, then today's guest can help you understand how your thoughts and beliefs can be impacting your ability to heal or even contributing to the condition you're wanting to resolve. Dr. Rita Louise is a graduate of the Berkeley Psychic Institute, where she studied meditation and energy medicine. After graduation, she returned to full-time studies, earning a degree as a naturopath and a PhD in natural health counseling. She is also a Reiki master, a certified hypnotherapist, and a certified mindfulness practitioner. Dr. Rita Louise, it is so good to have you on the show today because I really
It is
think,
wonderful to be here with you, Rita.
yeah, it's such a pleasure. I really think that this is such a great topic because it's still, even though it's around and people hear it, it's still kind of emerging in people's minds on the fact that what we're thinking and what we're doing is actually contributing to our physical health. It's not separate.
Exactly. And, the buzzwords is, well, you have a lot of stress, but no one really separates out what the stress is, and what might be stressing me might not be stressing you, and it might not be stressing any of the listeners in the audience. And so to sit there, you have to kind of unwind what your triggers are and unwind what's getting under my skin, and resolving that and healing that and paying attention to that so that you don't have that stress anymore.
Right. So terms, when people use terms like what I'm hearing is when they use terms like stress or trauma, it's what you're saying, it's just way too generic. It's almost
Way
like
too.
you become a little bit invisible, your needs become a little bit invisible under the those sort of broad umbrellas.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So can I give an example?
yes, please.
So one of my old, I'm going to say old now because I really worked on it, is financial. I mean, I'm assuming you work for yourself, so when
Yes.
you work for yourself, it gets around the holidays and work gets slow. And my normal reaction would be, oh my God, I'm gonna die, I'm not gonna be able to pay my bills. And it would be this whole barrage of negative thinking and stress about financial stuff, you know, but for somebody else, they might have an attachment disorder and they're having issues in their relationship, and that's creating the stress in their lives. And so it's really what we bring to the table that is the nature of that stress.
Absolutely. So we all develop these sort of thoughts and beliefs and, you know, from young and we carry them through. So how does that specifically impact our health? Like a lot of people go, okay, so I'm being negative, I feel down, I feel a bit, grumpy, I feel a bit low energy. But can you talk more into what that is actually doing to our health? How is it manifesting in our body?
So when we are, and I'm going to say trapped in a pattern of negative thinking, our body naturally will release stress hormones like cortisol, and so now we're
Mm,
running on adrenal hormones, which can play havoc on the function of our bodies, so there's that level. And I'm going to go into a little bit of Chinese medicine. So in Chinese
mm,
medicine, not that I'm an expert, but I like this part. They talk about each of the organs having carrying a different emotional energy. And so, if you happen to be a very angry person and you respond to everything in a fight response, or something happens and you automatically get triggered and now you're cranky and frustrated and whatever, it would make sense that you would develop a liver issue because in Chinese medicine, the liver houses anger and frustration. And
mm.
one of my personal favorites is the gallbladder. So many people have their gallbladders removed, but in Chinese medicine, the gallbladder has to do with planning and our ability to plan our way through a situation. So I've seen two different kinds of people. There are people that can't plan their way out of a paper bag, and when you ask them, it's like their parents can't plan, their aunts and uncles can't plan, their brothers and sisters can't plan, and none of them have gallbladders.
That
And then there's
is so interesting.
on the other side of the coin, there are the people that are the hardcore planners and they have every detail lined out. And then something happens and their plans get foiled. So just think about the young mother who's a planner and she has all of these things planned, and now the baby is sick. And so all of these plans that she has this forward motion on come to a screeching halt. And so it's my belief, even though there's obviously no science behind it, that people that develop gallstones tend to be those people. They plan, and that frustration and all of that emotional energy gets consolidated into a little gallstone that they hang on to.
That is so interesting. In actual fact, a light globe went off when you were saying that because gallbladder is in our family, along our
Mm-hmm.
line. And, my mother did have her gallbladder removed. And I can't say that my mother was the best planner. And a light globe just went off in me that I better start learning how to plan better because, I can't say that my gallbladder is the best. So that, I'm sure just for now, a lot of light globes just went off with the listeners going, oh, so, what emotion is actually like, they must probably start searching Chinese medicine now to see the equivalent of what emotion is with which organ. Um,
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to people who, because I find there's still a lot of, they have a disease and they go, this just happened to me. This just happens. There's nothing you can do about it. It just happens. The body just stops working properly. What would you say to that attitude, you know, around that?
After I stopped laughing at them,
Oh.
after that part, is that so to me, and I'm putting a very low number on this, you
Yes.
know, 80% of the diseases that manifest in the physical body, there is some kind of a psychological, emotional trigger that's sitting underneath the disease. And so what doesn't Raylan, Raylan, sorry about that.
Is that your dog?
It's my Raylan. He can be very quiet, and then someone walks down the street and he goes crazy. Come here. Um, but and the other 20% I attribute to a virus or a bacteria, or you break your leg, or and things that are more coming from external sources into the body. that we can't really control. I mean, obviously, we can do things to support our immunity to not have bacterial and viral things happen to us.
Mm.
And then there are some people that suggest that, well, there was a karmic reason why you broke your leg, which I personally don't like go down that road. It's like, well, it's broke, and
Yeah.
no amount of energy medicine or herbs is going to fix the fact that your arm is broke. So let's just start from here and move forward. What can we do to help support the healing process, or that might be,
Mm.
but 80%, and I think that's a very low number, is a huge number of how much we're involved in our own sickness.
Absolutely. That's amazing, isn't it? I think that's a number and a thought that people are still struggling to get their heads around. That
Mhm.
we're responsible, that we need to take that sort of ownership, that we're responsible for creating. I know when I say to people, well, you have to look at your emotion, you're creating that. I either get a laugh response or I get actually quite an angry response as well. Like saying, how on earth would I do that? How on earth am I creating this? Because they're not tapping into that whole process of what you're talking about. So maybe if you could speak a little bit more into what is the role of our, because we all have energy. Everyone talks about our energies. What is the role of that subtle energy in the disease process?
Okay. So as human beings, and our energy is supposed to move and flow. It kind of ebbs and flows like the water on a beach.
Mm,
And so when our energy is flowing, when we're in the groove, it's like I'm sitting here trying to make it be very generic here.
yeah.
Um, we're in good health. So when we're in a good place, when we feel connected, when we feel uplifted and whole, we don't have negative thinking at all because we're in the groove, we're in the flow. But when that negative thinking comes in, it turns down the movement of that subtle energy. So as an example, you can think of a light bulb, with a dimmer switch. And so when we're in the flow and we're in connected, it's like the switch is turned all the way to one side and the light is bright and we have great energy and we're good.
Mm,
But then when the negative thinking comes in or whatever that happens to be, you have an argument, it's like we turn that dimmer switch down, and depending on what's going on, it becomes lower and lower. And it's as if we're not having blood circulate through our body because that energy needs to circulate through us. And so if we're walking around with that dimmer switch with barely a light on, it's no wonder why we are manifesting illness in the body, especially if it's a long-term chronic situation.
right, right. And how do people recognize that? A lot of people aren't in tune with their bodies, though, are they? They're not, like they don't listen to the symptoms. Like they might be listening to symptoms, but they go, "Oh, I'll just take a headache tablet and get rid of that," or "I'll just go to the doctor and get a really quick fix," or "I'll just take, an antihistamine," or I'll just whatever it is that they're struggling with. What are some tips that you could give to our listeners to be able to start getting back in tune with that subtle energy that you're talking about, so they know that, oh, wait a minute, this thought is starting to bring me down, and then further down the track they start feeling pain somewhere, or they start feeling discomfort somewhere, or bloating, or whatever it is. How can they start tapping into that?
But I mean, it is so simple and it is just so unsatisfying that we are not taught this from an early age. Because the reality is that if you're having symptoms, so I'm going to actually back this up and I'm going to get a little like subtle energy technical here,
That's good.
but the subtle energy moves through what are called the different bodies, the different subtle bodies. There's the causal body, the mental body, the emotional body, and the etheric body, and then the physical body. And so if you have a lot of negative thinking, you start to like create crust or limitations for how that energy is moving through, but if you have a negative thought, it eventually will create a negative emotional response in you, which is going to create this blueprint of this is how the body is going to operate. And then once you start manifesting symptoms, it means you have already gone through all of these processes and now your body is feeling it. And so to me, when you're being symptomatic, it is your body's way of telling you, I need to stop and evaluate what's going on inside of me to see what I need to do. And this might be a little complicated, but I'm going to throw it out there. But let's say you're having, a gallbladder attack or whatever. You can just put your hands on that organ and ask it, what does it want from you, or what does it want to communicate to you? And just be open to any weird thing that might come into your mind, because that's usually our bodies talking to us. And they can be very specific. Like, you need to drink some water. And usually, this is the funny part, usually people already know what they're supposed to do or have a good idea. Like, oh, well, I shouldn't eat that candy bar, but then they eat it anyway, so they don't really listen to themselves. And I think if people just stopped and listened to themselves or listen to their bodies, they would be moving on the right path. I'm going to put a little caveat there. In today's society, you're right. We're told, well, just go take a pill, or just go have this organ chopped out, and very little is placed on self-exploration. But it also, I was talking about the 20% that you can't control, the broken arm, the bacterial, viral infections, whatever. But I added a different category, and that's neglect, because we are taught to neglect our bodies, and I'm not a eat all organic, vegan diet. I'm not, I don't push that. But there is having a certain amount of respect for not eating fast food every day. I mean, I had a client and I asked, because I was kind of talking nutrition. I said, well, what do you usually have for breakfast? And she told me Lucky Charms. And it didn't get any better from there. And I'm like, well, and then you wonder why you're having so many health issues.
For us in Australia, what are Lucky Charms?
So Lucky Charms is a breakfast cereal that is,
okay.
But it's like a little crunchy. Like, do you have Cheerios there?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so it's kind of like a Cheerio, but it's a fruity, sweet
Fruit Loops.
thing with Fruit Loops with mini marshmallows. Yeah, so it's like quadruple disgusting in my mind. And if somebody tells me like that's what they regularly eat for breakfast, I'm like, okay. But people think that it's normal and, that they should eat this junk and not exercise and not maybe take a vitamin. And, and I encourage people, pick one, go work out, get rid of some of the junk food from your life, do things for your mind, body, meditate, do yoga, something to be respectful of your body, because our society really does not promote that.
That a huge statement, but such a true one. And it's one, if you don't mind, if we could just explore that a little bit more, because I find that, maybe a lot of our listeners are experiencing sabotage and what you said about neglect. I think that, do you find that a lot of your clients come to you neglecting their body, like just don't care about it at all, or they do care about it, and then they, like you said, they sabotage themselves. They know what they need to do, to feel better, but then they just sabotage themselves.
Great
Can you,
question.
can you, I think it's really
So
big.
I find, yeah, I find a little bit of a mix with that. Um, yeah, I'm just trying to think of where I want to go with that. So, the ones that self-sabotage, if you look at their lives, they really don't have a whole lot of self-discipline in a lot of different areas of their lives.
Mm,
So maybe it would be the opportunity to incorporate that and bring that in, and saying, wait a minute, and see, here's an emotional piece. I'm worth it. I'm worth going to the gym every day. I'm worth not having donuts in the morning or eating, Lucky Charms,
yeah.
you know, because it's about me and my body.
Mm,
Um, but then there are other people that they just don't have the knowledge and they just don't think about it.
live on autopilot,
They
maybe?
just live on autopilot, well, this is just easier. They can't really figure out how to navigate eating healthy, or they're lazy, they don't want to cook, and so I do some strategizing with those clients of, well, what can you do to at least eat something healthy every day. Like, well, can you have a big salad and a piece of fruit? If you're eating all your other junk and you like do that for lunch, that's pretty easy,
Mm,
you know. So I have two stepkids, and when I met them, they lived on ramen noodles, chips, hot dogs. I mean, just which wasn't going to fly with me, and so it took like a year to wean them off of like everyday consumption of this really bad stuff. And they would say to me, because I like to cook, it's like, well, this doesn't taste good. And I finally looked at them and I said, well, my food tastes good. I go, you just have bad taste. And literally it took about a year because
yeah.
they were young. I didn't want to just take everything away.
Mm,
Um, for their taste buds to change so that they could recognize the flavor of good food, because they were just used to salt and chemicals and processed food. And so there is kind of a, I'm going to say little withdrawal process that needs to happen.
mm, absolutely. What I find really interesting is what I'm hearing from what you're saying is, we start, people present with a physical disease. They come and see you, they have some physical discomfort or some physical disease. And then you explore that, oh, all right, you have, like you were saying, no planning in life, or you have sabotage, or you have neglect. But then it's really interesting that it even goes deeper, like to find the real root cause isn't just on a
Oh,
physical.
I'm
Yeah, I know you have to go because, like you were just saying, then behind the sabotage is most probably a self-worth issue.
Mhm,
That their self-worth isn't where it should be, for them to support themselves. And then
mhm.
something else. Do you find that you can go down that path with your clients? Is there resistance, or once you start working with them, you find that they start feeling so much better, they want more, they want to open up more, and you find that the healing is greater?
So one of the primary things I bring to the table in my practice is working as a medical intuitive.
Yes.
So they'll sit there and talk about, oh, well, I have this ache and pain and whatever. And I'll look at it on a functional level. It's like, well, yeah, you have gallstones and your gallbladder seeming inflamed, and, your bioproduction isn't really working good. And I'll talk about it functionally, but then because this is how I operate. And then I shift gears and I'm like, okay, but I go into that you can't plan, and you know because with the planning, there are people that never learned how to plan, and so it's not that it's broken, it's that they never gained that skill set, versus people that learned how to plan, and choose not to plan. And so even separating that out, like they've been beaten up their whole lives every time they made a plan and they were told no, you stop planning. But
Yes.
their natural productivity, whatever that word is to plan, and so you find that emotional energy, and then usually if you can find the emotional energy, you can find the core belief that's sitting below that, like I'm invisible or I'm not worthy or and there's usually a I am statement that will come up sitting behind that. So the emotional part is, well, they make that choice, but really where things start getting screwed up is in that mental body, which is my beliefs about myself and my beliefs about this is how the world operates and this is how I'm supposed to operate in this world.
Mm. That is really interesting. Really interesting. So I think the key there is to start becoming aware and acknowledge what we're feeling,
Exactly.
and then,
Mm-hmm.
then come and see someone like you. But at least you're starting to develop some awareness. I would
Right.
like
And it's either becoming aware of what you're thinking, or what you're feeling. If it's a chronic physical condition, I think the feelings might be okay. Actually, I'm going to be more specific. So if you become symptomatic at different times, because there's like long-term chronic illness and, you have this pain. Um, but if there are situations where you're okay and now you become symptomatic, those are the easiest ones because then you can just stop and reflect on, okay, I was fine and now I'm not. And so what was going on? And I tell people you got to kind of give it a 3-day window of I had this encounter with my partner or my boss or whatever, and it left me really upset. And now my acid reflux is really bad.
right. Okay. I was wondering if you could, Dr. Rita, could you explain to the listeners what could their life look like and where can it be if they actually did what you were saying?
I think they could be healthier, like on a physical level, and they would also be happier because
That's
our bodies will, if we allow ourselves to go into uncomfortable situations or tolerate uncomfortable situations, you only have to think of the woman who is in the toxic relationship and chooses to stay. You
yes,
know, um, as you start raising that awareness, you can make different choices and get rid of that stress that is in your life. Oh, wait, I have a story for you. You're going to
yeah.
love this story. Oh my God. So
I
this
love a
is one
good
of my
story.
and this is one of my miracle stories. I mean, I literally call it a miracle story. So I had a woman, and it was somebody that I knew, came in for an appointment, and she had uterine fibroids, and the fibroids were bleeding. And she had gone to the gynecologist, and they said, "Well, we want to do a hysterectomy." And so she came to me to find out what she could do or get a second opinion on the whole thing or whatever. She just wanted information from me. And so her fibroids were bleeding. If I was going to rate them, I would have rated them on a 1 to 10 scale. They were bleeding at about a 3. So I felt based on what I was seeing, she had a window and based on their growth of about 6 months to just really focus on herself, her health, working with supplements, to turn it around. But then, of course, I have to go tap into that emotional stuff. And I'm like poking in and going, and I said, "Are you in a relationship?" And she said, "Yeah." And I go, "You need to dump him." I mean, it just, and she just looked at me and I said, "You are giving away all of your energy to this man with the hope that he will love you back." And I repeated that to her with the hope that he will love you back. And the session ended. My practice, it's like I have a lot of, I don't want to say one and dones, but they come, they get their information and they go. So I see her at an event like 6 months later, and she runs over and gives me this big hug. And she goes, well, they're gone. And I said, the fibroids? She goes, yeah. I go, and so is he. So apparently after our session, she dumped him and the fibroids went away.
That's
It's a freaking
incredible.
miracle story.
So she only saw you once. You gave her that advice. She obviously heeded the advice. And that's just what we were talking about before, wasn't it? When we have those toxic emotions, you can be in a toxic relationship and you don't realize that year after year, that sort of arguing and, just that toxic energy, how that is actually impacting your health. That is a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic story. I
I
love
love
that.
that story.
I love that. Because that also plays into the fact that what you're saying is true. It's exactly how our emotions can either create or exacerbate what we're experiencing on the physical level.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah,
mean, I was just stunned because it was only 6 months later that I saw her,
and
and I told her you have a 6 month window to do something so that they don't do the hysterectomy and
that's incredible.
stop. Which is why I call it a miracle story. Not everyone has the same kind of success, but she did.
Maybe would that go down to a person's determination and their belief
Mm-hmm.
in what they're doing and what you're saying.
I
Yeah.
think that she was ready to hear it. And I think, well, she really didn't want to have the hysterectomy, because she was aware enough to know that, just taking out a body part, especially your uterus, creates other kind of health issues and, prolapse issues. So she was very well aware of that. And so I applaud her for, I didn't expect her to dump the boyfriend, but, hey, it worked.
Her womb was more important.
Apparently.
Well, that's how you were saying before, that you have to put yourself as number one to
Hmm.
everything else. And she obviously decided to do that, which is great. I love it. I love it because that's living proof of what you're saying actually works. Which
Hmm.
kind of brings me to my next question. And I asked this to a few energy healers, etc., because what are some of the untrue myths around your approach that you've had to deal with? Like people saying to you, well, that can't possibly work, or, it takes too long. What are some myths around your work?
Hmm. I mean, I do think it takes time.
Mm,
I don't think that, okay, people want the one and done. They want the pill, and they're like, well, I had 2 sessions. Why aren't I healed? And with energy work in particular, there's kind of this belief that, well, I had 2 sessions and, it's kind of like I'm supposed to smack them on the forehead and they're miraculously healed, which is why I call that one client a miracle story. But so many times there's so much of the emotion and stress and everything that is just bound to the health issue, then it has to unwind. And some people will spontaneously unwind. So you hear those stories of, spontaneous remission. And then there are other people that want to hang on to it and not necessarily let it go. And so that's where the time part comes. It's not that I'm not doing a good job. It's because your body is processing in the way that it's going to process. I'm just the facilitator, and I can just create the environment for you to release the energy and shift your thinking and that whole internal environment, but I can't make your body change.
yeah, only we can. And I love
Hmm.
the, yeah, I really love that part where you said you don't want to let it go. That's really interesting.
Hmm.
Like, what's behind that for people when they don't, when they know um, this isn't good for me, or that this emotion is creating this, but they don't want to let it go. What do you find is behind that? Is it just fear, or is there something? Is there um, a common denominator amongst that across your clients, or is it just always totally individual? What's behind
I
not letting
mean, I
go?
would say, no, good question. I would say, if you're really taking it down to the bottom line, fear is always the culprit.
Yeah.
It's always the culprit. Um, but you have to think about it. Many of the programs that were instilled into us, or the trauma that was instilled into us came in at a very early age where we were unable to separate out this is healthy energy and this is a healthy way of living from not. I mean, as adults, if we're in an uncomfortable situation, we can sit there and go, well, that guy was a jerk and walk away. But when we're 5 years old, we just assume that that person has our best interest in mind. And so we just take the energy on and go, oh, well, there must be something wrong with me.
Mm,
Um, and so, though, that's the part that becomes harder because it's subconscious, it might be pre-verbal, so they can't even really connect with it. Like they can feel the effect, but they can't, there's not like any memories that will come up because often when I work with people, memories will come up. Um, I'm pretty good at going, you're like 6 or 7 years old, and the outcome was you ended up feeling like this. And usually they're like, oh yeah, my parents got divorced,
right.
and that's where the not God that started this whole process inside their
Mm,
body. And actually, this is the interesting one that I think you'll find fascinating. When talking about the mental emotional part, you can actually track back to where the imbalance started to help the person identify, what was going on because you heal that and everything else goes. So sometimes they might have a trauma and it creates like a little kink in the line, but then they have a very similar trauma a little bit later on in life and it takes
mm.
it and it embeds it makes it more permanent in their energy space, and now they're operating this way, so I don't know. It's really interesting. And, this
It
whole
really,
piece of work.
it really is. And if people are up for the challenge to investigate and look into their emotions, like you're saying, the outcome of the healing can be quite profound, which
Hmm.
which kind of leads me to asking you, what's your why? What's your why? This is how I start to like to end it. What's your why for doing this work?
So I became interested in psychic stuff when I was 12 or 13 and wanted to do psychic stuff. And And then finally, many, many, many years later, after reading a ton of books, found the Berkeley Psychic Institute and studied with them. And so I just wanted to be Rita the psychic chick. And I'm going to talk to you about your relationships because I like talking about relationships and I can be a little gossipy and like talk about your husband. And, and I was okay with that. But I would also do energy work with people. And what I found was that I was always finding people's health issues. Oh, was that a cesarean or a hysterectomy? Was that this or this? It's like, oh, your spine is kind of twisted like this, which apparently, I think everybody has channels. So people that are mediums that talk to dead people, that's the channel that flows the best for them. And so I just owned the fact that I was really good at finding health stuff, which propelled me to go get my degree as a naturopath because they would go, well, what can I do? And I would like meditate. I mean, I had nothing. I had
Mm,
absolutely nothing. I had this one client and I was doing energy work on her and I'm like, clearing. And when I do it, my hands are moving and I'm yawning. And I get down to the middle of her back. So this is before school. And I think this is what propelled me to go back to school. And I'm in the middle of her back, and there's just this like black energy sitting there. And I was like, well, there's this black energy sitting there. And I'm going, I think it's your kidneys. Yeah, it's your kidneys. And, and then I went into the whole emotional piece about the kidneys, or the emotional energy tied to it. But now that I know stuff, like I know it's your kidneys, for one, but then I can sit there and assess the kidneys. Is there an infection going on? Is there sediment in there? Is the kidney functioning properly? Blah, 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 so I can assess the health part as well and provide better information to them, and so, I just do what spirit tells me to do. And they were like, go back to school. And I said, okay.
Fantastic.
And that's part of it too. If you get directed, like drink a glass of water or go back to school or dump that idiot or whatever, you have to listen and say, okay. After you argue for a while, I always argue, but then eventually I'll say, okay.
I could just imagine you going, no, no, I don't want to, no. And then you do.
Always.
We're always in a process of learning. So what are three ways our listeners can start listening to their body? What are three ways that they can simply, like what you were saying just then, drink water, do this? What can they do to start calming their body, their environment, to allow themselves to start listening? What are three ways that they could possibly do that?
So I think one way, and we've talked a lot about the emotions, but an easier way is starting to pay attention to your thoughts about, what should I have for dinner? Or, what should I be doing now? And being open to receiving that answer, because I think people receive the answer and then we supersede it. We argue with it and then we just say, I'm just going to do whatever. See, I've learned, because I've kind of gotten my butt kicked from spirit too many times, that I argue and then I just do it. But people are really good at not listening to themselves. So my number one is start listening to yourself.
Right.
And doing whatever it is you're telling yourself to do, or spirit, or, your higher self, whatever word you want to put there, doing that. Recognizing that you have value, and your health has value. And because we're not taught to value ourselves.
That's
at
a big
all,
one.
which includes boundaries. uh, and then three, this actually I think will make a good circle. So if you get that thought to eat a salad for lunch and you feel better after, or after a couple of weeks of doing that, then say thank you and find gratitude for the thoughts that you're having, because then you'll get more. And it kind of completes that cycle for you. And you can't have negative thoughts if you have a gratitude attitude.
I love it. I love it. And it's so true. I love it. I love that circle. And I hope that all our listeners actually do that, because they'll get so much benefit from it.
Well, and I suggest to people, pick one thing, just one thing, and incorporate it into your life. There are so many people that go, well, I'm going to do this. And they come up with this exercise routine and they get rid of all the junk food from their house. And they're going to do all of this stuff all at once. And they last for about a week. And then they stop because it's too overwhelming. And I'm the slow go girl. Pick one thing. Incorporate that into your life. And then maybe after a week or two, if you're feeling compelled, incorporate something else, because then it becomes part of your life and your lifestyle. And just for the listeners, I do eat like Kentucky Fried Chicken every so often. And, not every day, but, I really am not a saint. I don't eat organic food, but my health and vitality is great. I go to the doctor and they're like, well, what medication are you on? I'm like, none. And they just look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think, our listeners can take away quite a few good nuggets from this. Like you say, go low and slow, one thing at a time, and, watch the negative thoughts. Most probably the key to start shifting whatever they're feeling or not creating what they don't want.
Exactly.
Perfect. Dr. Rita, thank you so much for enlightening our listeners about your work and providing them with another possibility to heal. It has been great. I've loved having you on the show. You're an absolute joy.
Well, thanks for having me. This was wonderful. That's because we're both named Rita.
That's exactly right. There's got to be something behind that.
That's right.
It's been beautiful having you on the show. Thank you so much. And thanks for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to connect with Rita and book in or learn more about what her work is, all of her details will be in the show notes. So please contact Rita, Dr. Rita, and see where your health can go. Thank you. I would love to know, what was the biggest insight or aha moment you got from this interview? So you can now speak up, take action, and make informed decisions for your health. And if you like this episode, get instant access to your free ebook, Alternative Wisdom, Taking Back Control of Your Health, at life-onus.com.